Chapter 1. The Purchase Esty. Landry Parish, Louisiana, September 1847. The air in New Orleans that morning hung thick as cane syrup. Wet heat rolling off the Mississippi and mixing with the stink of fish tar and human sweat. Charles Boggart Marchand stood on the auction block's raised platform, coat unbuttoned, hat in hand, eyes fixed on the line of men being marched forward in irons. Most buyers milled around the younger field hands or the fancy girls destined for the plaquage houses upriver. Marchand had no interest in any of them. His gaze settled on one man at the end of the row. He was taller than any other on the block, 6 feet and 4 inches by the auctioneer's tape, and built like something carved from hard oak. Shoulders wide enough to block the sun. Arms corded from years of swinging axes and hauling logs. Legs long and solid as cypress knees. The auctioneer rattled off the usual litany. Samuel, age about 24. Prime cotton hand, no brands, no runaway marks. Guaranteed sound in wind and limb. Then, almost as an afterthought, he added, strong-willed. Sold 3 times already. Requires firm management. Laughter rippled through the crowd. 3 times sold in 4 years was a warning, not a virtue. No one wanted a man who kept forcing his owners to cut their losses. Marchand raised his card. The bidding started at $400 and climbed slowly. 600, 650, 7. Each time another planter dropped out. Marchand lifted his card again without hesitation. When the hammer finally fell at $800, nearly double the price of any other man that day, the crowd parted to let him through. Some stared openly. Others shook their heads. 800 for a troublemaker. The auctioneer handed over the bill of sale. At the bottom, in fresh ink, someone had scrawled, strong-willed, requires firm management. Marchand folded the paper once and slipped it inside his coat. He looked up at the man who now belonged to him. Samuel stared straight ahead, jaw set, eyes the color of river clay after rain. No fear in them, no pleading, only a kind of watchful stillness, as if he were already measuring distances, weighing possibilities, deciding what kind of man stood before him now. On the steamboat ride upriver to Opelousas, Marchand sat in the shaded cabin while Samuel stood chained on the lower deck with the other purchases. Through the open doorway, Marchand watched him. The way he tested the irons without seeming to move. The way he noted every crewman, every turn of the wheel, every sandbar the boat skirted. The man was cataloging the world the way a general studies. Terrain before battle. 3 days later, they reached the Marchand plantation, 3,000 acres of sugarcane. A wide gallery house painted white, quarters that looked like chicken coops from a distance, and a new red barn that smelled of fresh pine. The overseer, Dutch Keller, met the wagon at the gate. Keller took one look at Samuel and spat tobacco juice into the dust. Another big one, thinks he's king, Keller muttered. I'll break him quick. No, Marchand said quietly. Put him in the stables. Light work only. Feed him the same as the house servants. And Keller, if I see a mark on him that I didn't put there myself, you'll be looking for work on the Texas frontier. Keller's face darkened, but he knew better than to in front of the hands. He jerked his head, and 2 drivers marched Samuel away. For 3 weeks, Marchand watched. He watched Samuel curry horses with slow, deliberate strokes, every motion economical, never wasted. Watched him lift feed sacks that took 2 ordinary men to manage and stack them as though they were pillows. Watched the way the other enslaved people kept their distance at first, wary of the new man. The big man, the one the overseers already hated, Dot, and he watched the day. Dutch Keller decided to test the limits of Marchand's strange order. It happened in the late afternoon. Sun bleeding orange across the cane fields. Keller strode into the stable yard swinging his whip like a man who enjoyed the sound it made cutting air. Samuel was brushing down Marchand's favorite mare. Keller barked and ordered something trivial. Move faster. Speak when spoken to. The usual litany of petty dominations. Samuel kept brushing. Keller stepped closer and cracked the whip across Samuel's shoulders. The leather split skin. Blood spotted the dirt. And Samuel stopped, turned, caught Keller's wrist on the second swing as easily as catching a fallen leaf. The yard went still. Drivers froze. Horses shifted nervously in their stalls. Keller's mouth opened. But no sound came out. Samuel held the wrist a moment long enough for Keller to understand that the bones could be powder in another heartbeat. Then let go and resumed brushing the mare. Keller stumbled back, face purple, already reaching for the pistol on his belt. That's enough. Marchand's voice cut across the yard like a blade. He had been watching from the gallery of the big house, silent until now. He descended the steps slowly, boots crunching on gravel. Keller started to protest. Mr. Marchand, this neg. I said enough. Marchand's tone left no room for discussion. Go cool off, Keller. I'll handle discipline on this plantation. Keller spat again, this time at Samuel's feet, and stalked away. When the yard emptied, Marchand walked into the stable. Samuel stood beside the mare, blood running down his back in thin lines. Expression unchanged. Marchand studied him for a long moment. I know what you are, he said at last. I watched you on the block. I watched you on the boat. I watched you just now. You won't break? Most men would have groveled or swung back and died for it. You did neither. That makes you rare. Samuel said nothing. I'm not going to try to break you, Marchand continued. I'm going to make you an offer instead. He stepped closer, lowering his voice so only Samuel could hear. I like to watch men fight. Real fights. No rules except the ones nature gave us. I've seen boxing in New Orleans, bare knuckle in Mobile, stick fights in Charleston. But I want more than watching. I want to own the best there ever was. Samuel's eyes narrowed slightly, the first crack in the mask. Here's the bargain, Marchand said. You fight when I tell you to. You win. And in return, no one on this plantation who matters to you will ever feel the whip again. Extra rations. Better quarters. The woman in the kitchen you've been watching, Diner, isn't it? She'll never be sold. The old man who showed you the path, Silas, he stays. The boy who trails after you like a shadow, Marcus, he grows up safe. You lose or you refuse, and I start with them. I'll sell them tomorrow to the worst places I can find. You know I can do it. Samuel's hands tightened on the curry comb until the wood creaked. Marchand smiled without warmth. But if you win, and I believe you will, then you live better than any man in bondage has a right to expect. Your own cabin. Meat 3 times a week. No field work. And every time you drop another fighter in the dust, I get richer and you get stronger. We both profit. He waited. Samuel looked past him, toward the setting sun bleeding across the cane, then back again. How many fights? He asked. His voice was low, steady, the first words Marchand had ever heard him speak. Marchand shrugged. As many as it takes. Samuel considered this. Then he nodded once. Marchand extended his hand not to shake, because that would never do. But as a gesture that sealed the pact between owner and owned. Samuel did not take it. Instead he turned back to the mare and resumed brushing. Slow, deliberate strokes, as if the conversation had already been forgotten. Marchand felt the first faint chill of something he could not name. Not fear exactly. Recognition? Perhaps. He had just bought more than a fighter. He had bought a reckoning wearing the shape of a man. Asterisk. Chapter 2. The First Blood, November 14. 1847 to 3 miles west of the Marchand plantation. The clearing was nothing special. A patch of high ground ringed by water oaks and black gum trees. Torches stuck in the mud every 10 paces, their pine knot flames spitting resin into the night. 15 carriages and wagons stood at the edges, lanterns hung from axles so the horses wouldn't spook. The men who stepped down wore frock coats and silk waistcoats, but they had left their wives and their good names back at the big houses. Here they were just gamblers with blood on their minds. A circle had been scraped in the dirt, 25 feet across. No ropes, no stakes. Just a line drawn with the heel of a boot. 2 enslaved drivers from Etienne Roussel's plantation stood at opposite sides, holding jugs of corn whiskey and tin cups. They poured for the white men only. No one offered the fighters a drink. Samuel arrived last. Martian had dressed him in clean Osnaburg trousers and nothing else. His feet were bare, wrapped in strips of burlap for the mud. Torchlight slid across the ridges of muscle in his chest and arms, across the fresh welts Keller had given him 3 weeks earlier, now scabbed into dark lines. He looked neither left nor right as Martian led him forward on a light chain clipped to a leather cuff. The chain was theater. Both men knew it could be snapped if Samuel chose. It stayed on only because Samuel allowed it. Across the circle waited Jupiter. Roussel's fighter was older. Maybe 30, thick through the neck and shoulders. Skin latticed with old whip scars and the pale seams of knife work. He had won 3 fights already, 2 to the death. Roussel bragged about him the way other men bragged about stallions. Jupiter bounced on the balls of his feet, rolling his shoulders, eyes fixed on Samuel with the flat shine of a man who had long ago stopped expecting mercy. The planters formed their ring of bodies. Bets flew fast. 20 on Jupiter. He's got the experience. 50 says the big one ends it in 10 minutes. I'll take that. My money's on Roussel's nigger. He killed a man in Natchez last spring with 1 punch. Marchand stood silent, hands clasped behind his back, feeling the weight of $800 riding on the outcome. More than money, reputation. If Samuel lost tonight, every man here would laugh at the fool who paid double for damaged goods. Thick-set planter named Whitfield stepped into the center. He carried a gold-cased watch. Rules is simple, he called, voice carrying over the low mutter of the crowd. Fight till one man can't stand or yields. No weapons but what God gave you. Step over the line and you forfeit. Begin when I drop the handkerchief. He held up a square of white linen. The clearing went quiet except for the hiss of torches and the distant scream of a panther somewhere out in the swamp. The handkerchief fluttered down. Jupiter came fast, ducking low, aiming to drive Samuel back against the spectators. A smart move. Most big men hated being crowded. Samuel did not step back. He planted his feet and met Jupiter chest to chest. The first punch, Jupiter's, cracked against Samuel's ribs like an axe on green wood. Samuel absorbed it, pivoted, and answered with a short, chopping blow to the side of Jupiter's neck. The crowd roared approval. They circled. Jupiter was quicker than his build suggested, slipping inside Samuel's longer reach, hammering body shots that would have dropped lesser men. Each thud of fist on flesh sounded wet and heavy. Samuel's skin darkened with rising bruises, but his eyes stayed calm, almost sleepy. Measuring dot at 7 minutes, Jupiter landed a looping right that opened a cut above Samuel's left eye. Blood ran warm into his brow, stinging. The planters leaned forward, scenting weakness. Roussel was already grinning. Samuel wiped the blood with the back of his hand. Looked at it for half a heartbeat, then smiled. Small, private. Terrible closing parenthesis. He changed. Where he had been patient, now he was sudden. He stepped inside Jupiter's next swing, caught the man's arm, and drove 3 short punches into the floating ribs. Crack, crack. Jupiter grunted, tried to clinch. Samuel shoved him off, brought his knee up into the man's gut, then hammered a downward blow behind the ear. Jupiter staggered. The crowd noise faltered. Samuel did not let him recover. He moved like something released, fists rising and falling in a rhythm that was almost beautiful in its economy. Jupiter raised his arms to guard his head. Samuel struck the body until the guard dropped, then struck the head until the body sagged. 17 minutes after the handkerchief fell, Jupiter went to his knees, coughing blood that looked black in the torchlight. He tried to rise once, legs trembling, and Samuel ended it with a single straight punch to the temple. The sound was soft, almost gentle. Jupiter folded forward and did not move again. Silence. Then the clearing erupted. Some men shouting in triumph, others cursing lost money. Marchand felt the breath leave his body in a rush he hadn't known he was holding. Nearly $200 changed hands in the next 60 seconds. Roussel stood over his fallen fighter, face pale, mouth working sound less like Samuel remained in the circle, chest heaving, blood and sweat cutting pale channels through the dirt on his skin. He looked once at Marchand, expression unreadable, then at the ring of white faces lit by torch glow. No triumph? No pleading? Just waiting. A plantation doctor, hired for the night and paid to keep his mouth shut, knelt beside Jupiter. Felt for a pulse, shook his head. Dead, he announced. As if anyone needed telling, Martian stepped forward, unclipped the light chain from Samuel's wrist. The gesture felt heavier than it should have. Later, riding back in the wagon, Martian counted his winnings by lantern light. $196 in notes and coin. Enough to buy 2 prime field hands. Enough to start the whispers that Charles Marchand had found something extraordinary. Samuel sat opposite, hands resting on his knees, staring out at the passing darkness. Marchand cleared his throat. You feel anything? About the man you just killed? Samuel turned his head slowly. I feel the same thing he felt when he stepped into that circle, he said. Nothing left to lose. Martian waited for more, but nothing came. The wagon rolled on, wheels splashing through puddles that reflected moonlight like broken mirrors. Behind them, Jupiter's body was loaded into the back of Roussel's cart. By morning, the parish doctor would sign a certificate. Death by fever. The clearing would be empty again, torches burned to stubs, blood soaked into the red Louisiana dirt, where the swamp would drink it down and remember nothing. But the men who had watched would remember, and somewhere in the quarters, Diner the cook would wake before dawn to find an extra portion of bacon in the larder. Silas would find his rheumatism salve refilled without asking. And 10-year-old Marcus would discover a bright copper penny. Under his pallet, payment on a promise that had just been kept in blood. The first fight was. Over .30-6 remained, and the man they would soon call the Bayou Giant had learned exactly what his life was now worth. One victory at a time. Spring 1849. The Martian plantation. The journal was bound in dark calfskin, its spine cracked from nightly use. Charles Boggart Martian kept it locked in the bottom drawer of his roll-top desk. The key on a ribbon around his neck even when he slept. By candlelight in the small hours after the house had gone quiet. He wrote in a neat, slanted hand, Fight the 19th to the 14th of 1849. Opponent, Samson. Prop, J.B. Laforgue. Location, Old Dupree Mill. 6 May. South of Washington. Duration, 21 minutes. Outcome, Samson dead. Broken neck. Wager pool, $420. My share. $312 notes. Samuel opened slow. Took punishment to left side. 3 ribs cracked. Still finished with a throw and stamp. Doctor says Samson never felt the end. Samuel refused laudanum again. Eats only beef and cornmeal now. Says it keeps him heavy. He closed the book, pressed his forehead to the cool leather, and felt the familiar sickness rise. $312 for a man's life. Neat columns, tidy profit. The same way he recorded sugar yields or the price of molasses in New Orleans. 19 fights. 19 victories. 14 corpses carried out under blankets or rolled into bayous for the gar and gators. The other 5 maimed so badly their owners wrote them off as total losses. And Samuel still. Unbroken. The plantation had changed around the silent axis of those. New MBE, RS a new cabin stood behind the blacksmith. Shop, single room, plank floor. A real iron bedstead, Martian had shipped from Philadelphia. Samuel's cabin. No one entered without permission, not even Keller. Inside, a table, 2 chairs, an oil lamp. A shelf of books Martian pretended not to notice. A worn Bible, a volume of Plutarch, a dog-eared copy of Olata Equiano that had somehow traveled from a Charleston attic to a Louisiana slave quarter. Dinah now wore calico dresses instead of Osnaburg. Her hands no longer cracked from lie. Silas had a feather mattress and a rocking chair on his porch. Marcus, 12 now, all knees and elbows, was learning letters from the old mulatto carpenter in town. Paid for out of fight winnings no one dared question. They were the visible payments on a debt, written in other men's blood. Outside, the plantation itself had grown fat. New boiling kettles gleamed in the sugar house. A second gin stood where the old mule shed used to be. Marchand wore Paris coats now and drank Madeira with dinner. Planters who once smirked at the fool who paid $800 for a refractory slave now saw his company, begged invitations to the next competition, offered their own. Fighters like priests offering lambs. Samuel had become currency. Yet something in the arithmetic had begun to rot. It was in the way the other enslaved. People looked at him now, half reverence, half dread. Children followed at a distance, whispering that Monsieur Samuel could not be killed, that he had sold his shadow to the rougarou and walked free into the moon. Old women crossed themselves when he passed. Even the overseers stepped wide, touching their hat brims out of habit rather than respect. And it was in the way Samuel looked back at Marsh and not with hatred. Hatred would have been cleaner. With patience? The patience of a man counting days on a wall only he could see tonight. After the 19th entry, Marchand poured 2 fingers of bourbon and carried the glass out onto the gallery. The spring air was thick with jasmine and the distant smell of burning cane stubble. Somewhere a nightjar called. He drank half the bourbon in one swallow and waited. Samuel appeared without sound, stepping from the darkness as though the night itself had shaped him. "You're hurt," Marchand said. "The ribs again? They'll knit. You could end these fights quicker. You play with them now?" Samuel leaned against the gallery post. Moonlight carved silver along the edge of his shoulder. "I let them hit me so they believe they still have hope," he said. "Hope makes them reckless. Reckless men die faster." Marchand felt the bourbon turn sour in his stomach, and when there are no more reckless men left to kill, Samuel's eyes reflected the moon like still water. Then maybe the next one will be smart enough to refuse. Marchand laughed once, a short, ugly sound. "No planter will ever refuse the purse. You know that?" Samuel said nothing. He simply looked out over the cane fields, row upon row of dark swords glinting. And Marchand understood that they were not talking about the fighters anymore. A silence stretched, broken only by the creak of the gallery boards. "I keep thinking," Marchand said at last, "that one day you'll lose. That some men will be faster or luckier or just mean enough. And then this ends. The bargain ends. Everything goes back to how it was." Samuel turned his head slowly. "It won't be one of them that ends it," he said. "You already know who it will be." Marchand's hand tightened on the glass until the rim cracked. A thin line of blood welled across his palm. He hadn't felt it. Samuel saw, of course. He reached out, not gently, but not cruelly, and took the broken glass away. Setting it on the rail, "Go write your numbers, Mr. Marchand," he said quietly. 19 down. 18 to go. He walked away into the dark, footsteps silent on the grass. And Marchand stood bleeding on his own gallery, staring at the empty place where a man who belonged to him had just spoken like a man who belonged to no one. Inside the desk drawer. The journal waited. Tomorrow, Marchand would record the healing time for 3 cracked ribs, the cost of beef at 20 cents a pound. The exact weight Samuel carried now, 238 pounds, most of it scar and will. Neat columns, tidy profit. But tonight he left the drawer locked and the candle guttering. And for the first time in 2 years, he did not sleep. Out in his cabin, Samuel sat on the edge of the iron bedstead and unwrapped the cloth from his swollen hands. By lamplight, he opened the Equiano book to a page he had marked with a palmetto frond. He read the same sentence he had read every night for 6 months. When you make men slaves, you deprive them of half their virtue and make them capable of any crime to escape. He traced the words with a finger that had crushed 14 skulls, then closed the book and looked toward the big house, where 1 candle still burned behind shuttered windows. 18 more. He thought and somewhere in the quarters. Marcus practiced writing the letters Samuel in the dirt with a stick, whispering the name like a prayer. The ledger of flesh kept growing, page by page, death by death. And the man who paid the butcher's bill in blood was beginning to understand the final price. March 17th, 1851, Atchafalaya Basin. Edge of the world, the swamp breathed around them, slow, wet, ancient. Fog clung to the cypress knees like ghosts too tired to leave. A narrow path, part plank, part mud, part prayer, led to the clearing where the final fight would be held. No plantation house within 10 miles. No law within 20. Only water, trees, and the low thunder of alligator bellows. 83 white men arrived in pirogues and skiffs, lanterns swinging from prows. They came from Baton Rouge, Lafayette, Natchez, even Galveston. Some had wagered plantations. Others had wagered pride. All had wagered on blood dot, the purse, $1,500 in gold and banknotes. Locked in an iron box guarded by two of Crane's overseers, side bets pushed the total past 5,000. Enough to buy freedom for 50 souls, if any here believed in such a thing. Samuel arrived last, pulled in by a silent Cajun boatman who vanished the moment the bow touched mud. He wore the same Osnaburg trousers, feet wrapped in burlap gone black with swamp water. His torso was a map of old wars, white scars, purple bruises, the fresh pink of stitches from the Goliath fight 6 weeks earlier. 3 ribs still clicked when he breathed deep. His left eye was half swollen shut. He looked like a man carved from the swamp itself. Across the circle stood Ajax. 7 feet of muscle and scar tissue, imported from Jamaica at a cost of $2,000. 9 kills and 3 islands. Crane had kept him in chains for the journey, not for fear of escape, but to remind him who owned the breath in his lungs. Ajax rolled his neck. The iron links clinking like feral bells stopped between them. 33 feet of churned mud, ringed by torches that hissed in the damp. 43 enslaved workers, drivers, cooks, boatmen, stood at the edges, eyes lowered but seeing everything. They had been brought to serve, to witness, to carry the story home. Martian stood beside Samuel, coat unbuttoned, face pale as cane ash. In his pocket, a scrap of brown paper, the note from patients that had arrived at dawn. They mean to kill him no matter what. He had shown it to Samuel an hour ago. Samuel had read it once, folded it smaller, and tucked it into his waistband without a word. Now the moment had come. Crane stepped forward, gold watch glinting. Same rules as always, he called. Fight till one yields or can't. Winner's owner takes the box. Again on the drop, he raised a red silk handkerchief, someone's idea of ceremony. The swamp held its breath. The silk fell. Ajax moved first, long arms windmilling, trying to use reach. Samuel slipped inside, took a hammer blow to the shoulder that rocked him sideways, answered with a short hook to the liver. The sound was meat on butcher's block. Ajax grunted but did not slow. They fought like titans in a world too small for them. 15 minutes in, both bled from a dozen cuts. Ajax's left eye swelled shut. Samuel's ribs ground with every breath. The crowd noise faded to a low animal hum. The enslaved watchers stood frozen, faces shining with torchlight and something fiercer. At 25 minutes, Samuel changed. He stopped circling, stopped defending, walked straight into Ajax's fists and kept walking. Each blow that landed drew a gasp from the crowd. But Samuel's eyes never left Ajax's. He absorbed a punch that should have shattered a jaw. Answered with 3 to the body, then 1 to the temple that dropped Ajax to his knees. Ajax rose. Samuel dropped him again. On the third rise, Ajax's legs betrayed him. He swayed, arms heavy. Samuel stepped close, whispered something too low for any white ear to catch, then drove a final blow to the temple. The crack was soft, almost polite. Ajax fell forward into the mud and did not move. The doctor knelt, pressed fingers to neck, shook his head. Dead. Silence, thicker than the fog. Samuel stood, swaying, blood and swamp water dripping from his chin. He looked once at the iron box, once at the ring of white faces, then at the 43 black faces beyond. Harrison Talbot gave the nod. 6 rifles rose from the shadows, overseers hidden in the trees, barrels already cocked. The plan, 1 volley, 1 body in the water, 1 legend erased. Before a trigger could fall, the 43 moved. Not a charge. Not a shout. Just 43 bodies stepping forward in perfect unison. forming a living wall between Samuel and the guns. A cook from Crane's plantation, a driver from Talbot's, a boy no older than Marcus. They stood shoulder to shoulder, silent, unarmed, unbreakable. The rifles wavered, Talbot's face twisted purple. Shoot through them if you have to. But the overseers hesitated. Shooting another man's property was theft. Theft among planters was war. And 43 witnesses would carry the story. To every quarter in Louisiana, Marchand stepped into the breach. The fight is over. His voice cracked like a whip. Samuel won by the rules we all swore to. Any man who disagrees can meet me at dawn with pistols or lawyers. Choose your poison. A ripple of protest, then silence. The rifles lowered. The moment passed. The crowd dispersed in muttering knots. Gold changing hands, boats pulling away into the fog. Within an hour, the clearing was empty except for torches guttering in mud and Ajax's body cooling under a tarp. Marchand found Samuel sitting on a cypress knee, washing blood from his hands in brown water. "We're leaving," Marchand said. "Now," Samuel nodded. "One thing first." He walked to the iron box, pried it open with fingers that should not have had strength left. Inside, stacks of notes, gold eagles, a single silver dollar someone had tossed in for luck. Samuel took the silver dollar, pressed it into the hand of the nearest enslaved boy, Marcus's age, eyes wide, then closed the box and handed it to Marchand. "For the others," he said. They pulled out together. Marchand in the bow, Samuel in the stern, the swamp closing behind them like a door. Epilogue, the reckoning 2 weeks later. Manumission papers were filed in Opelousas for Diner, Silas, and Marcus. Each left with money, clothes, and a destination no one wrote down. Samuel stayed, not as property. Marchand burned the bill of sale in the kitchen stove and watched the ashes rise. As partner in a quieter war. Over the next 3 years, 27 more people walked off the Marchand plantation, with papers or without, guided by routes only Samuel knew. Local sheriffs searched, found nothing, blamed runaways on bad luck. The journal ended with one final entry, dated March 18th, 1,851 to 37 fights. 37 victories. 37 dead. The bargain is fulfilled. I have seen what a man can become when the world leaves. Him no other path. God have mercy on us both. Samuel disappeared. In the spring of 854, some say he walked north under a false name. Others swear he lived out his days in the Atchafalaya, a maroon king with no crown but memory. No record marks his grave. Marchand died in 1879, rich, respected, haunted. The letter found after his death, unsigned, ink blurred by tears, was read once by his grandson, then locked away. The swamp reclaimed the clearing. Water rose, cypress grew, and the torches rotted to dust. But in quarters across Louisiana, children grew up hearing the story whispered at twilight. The bayou giant who fought 37 times and never lost. Who turned every blow into a door for someone else to walk through, whether his name was truly Samuel. Whether every fight happened exactly as told, these things fade. What remains is the truth beneath the legend. In the darkest hour, one man found a way to make his chains into keys, and the swamp, patient as ever, keeps the secret still.